and the of its own. So the first line that you see is going down just because it's broken down different of its own. So the second category, environmental resources, that is also going down because we had the IRWM grants under environment. Now that has moved to water supply, and I'll get to this in detail. And then the water demand budget is staying almost the same. There's a slight reduction because public outreach was part of water demand, and now it's under the general manager's budget.
So together under ASR, that's 750,000. We have also budgeted about 230,000 for the Seaside Basin Water Master, and this includes, John can speak to this better, but this includes a budget for implementation of monitoring and maintenance of the Seaside Plan, which is a court-adopted document, as well as the hydrological model for Seaside. And then, John, feel free to chime in if you have more details here. But I'm going to go over the high-level overview. And then hydrological, this is a big category. This time around, we have a budget, or we are budgeting around 800,000 for redrilling of 3 Seaside wells. And so this category was previously also under environmental resources, but now has been moved to water supply. And then the IRWM grants, these were also under environmental resources. This 2.5 million is now under water supply. So that's the water supply budget. Moving on to demand. Water distribution permitting. Now this is a much smaller budget compared to the previous one. 57,000 for permitting, 100,000 for demand management, and that is deed restriction, CCAR compliance, and legal review. That's what the 100,000 is. And then we have another 650,000 for water conservation programs. I see the spelling is incorrect, but we'll fix it. So under water conservation, we have the conservation and efficiency workshops, the linen towel program. We also buy devices for conservation, and then we have advertising and website maintenance. And then the other big category is rebates, which these are reimbursable rebates for conservation related rebates that where we get the funding from CalAN. And then the new item this time around is the non-functional turf replacement that we have 100,000 budgeted for that. Environmental resources, again, much smaller budget this time around. So riparian mitigation, that's all the vegetation management work, permitting and trash removal that the environmental team does. And then for under aquatic resources, we have around 300,000 for the operations and maintenance of the Sleepy Hollow facility, and then another 100,000 for rescuing, monitoring, and transportation of steelhead, and then a very small budget for lagoon mitigation. So this is the fourth category that has been broken out, and here this is where where we have the big dollars. So we have budgeted a purchase of around 5,286 acre-feet of pure water Monterey at the rate of $3,800 an acre-foot. Now this can change, and we'll make adjustments. I think we will be buying water at a much lower rate that we know, but the amount of water that we will eventually purchase that remains to be seen. We are also budgeting for around 300 acre-feet of drought reserve. That's the 1.1 million. And then next year, we have an increased budget for the public acquisition of the water system, or Measure J. That's 1.8 million. And then we also plan to kind of renovate this boardroom. We plan to have better audiovisual and the seating arrangement. So there's some funding for that.
So if we could pause for a moment. So in the last 4 slides, I just want you to be aware that there are things that we do have discretion over. So if there were, some form of crisis financially, we can accommodate. In the new projects in ASR, we had 475,000. It's a placeholder. As you know, we'd like to increase injection capacity. The easiest way to do so would be to get CalAm to reconnect ASR well number 4. The harder way to do it would be to try to drill a new well. We're somewhat constrained with the utility power lines and locational issues. So it's an idea right now. So just under $500,000. Nichelle mentioned the up to 3 replacement wells in the Seaside Basin. That rehabilitation could be deferred if necessary. With 100,000 for non-functional turf. Enforcement doesn't really begin until 2027. So it's really just a half a year, and much of our work is going to be if our Senate bill passes, which we'll know in about a month and a half. If we do have enforcement capability, then just identification and communication is a lot cheaper than $100,000. $100,000 would be to develop a program on some cost sharing or incentives. So we've got discretion there. And then, as mentioned, the drought reserve may be 300 acre-feet is higher than where we'll land because there may be a limitation in the water purchase agreement to 200 acre-feet per year. And the price of water, we're going to issue a company water rate letter probably tomorrow. That's about $140 less than the assumption that's in place. Director Edwards wanted me to point out the 3rd bullet on the last chart. So maybe if you can go back one. The public acquisition of the forward one of the water system. This is based on budgets provided by our primary attorneys, our outside attorneys, and also includes consulting and both the engineering consulting and the financial consulting. As you've probably noticed over the last 4 to 5 years, that the strategy of legal delays tends to push these expenditures out. So there will be a little bit of play in those. All in, we've got probably more than $1.5 million of play in those categories. So.
Got a question. On the litigation expenses, it sounds like it's good news to me to say that things might be happening in the next budget year. Is that kind of the sub message?
Yeah.
The message?
Yeah. I mean, we currently have a court date for a main bench trial in October. And we have some other things that we're starting to develop to be ready for the right to take trial. Big assumption that we get through the mini bench trial on activation of latent powers, new or different services. If we don't pass that test, then there may be some expenditure that was in anticipation of the bench trial that goes for naught, but we kind of have to do it on the timeline. But yeah, there's progress.
That's just good to see.
It's good question.
Reflected in real numbers as well as calendar time.
Yeah.
What's the reason for the reduction in the water rate?
A couple of things. We met with Monterey One Water at length over a couple of meetings. We've identified some prior expenditures that could then be returned back into a true up, meaning overpaid a little bit. And so we subtracted that from the proposed water rate. That's a primary one. Also, the economies of scale really. So adding the expansion, your denominator got quite a bit bigger, but you didn't have to scale up staff and building size and things like that. Yeah.
Good, that's good.
Okay, going back to ASR. That 500,000 or 490,
475, yeah.
is that for us to replumb that well, that to turn that around? And if we do, is it ours or is it Cal-Am?
It's Cal-Am's, but they've been depreciating it as a used and useful asset, which begs a different question because it's not being used for injection.
Right.
Yeah. Or extraction, yeah, but it's got a nice treatment plant that's also not being used. It's being leased on an annual basis. So that needs to be cleaned up, but it's clearly a Cal-Am asset.
Okay, but if they decide to let us have it or let us fix it for them, we're going to use it and put some kind of language in there that you can't revert this back into when you come up with emergency. I hope the board don't.
Well, and that would be the goal if we spend our money to replumb that well. If we decide to drill a new well, then this would just be design and preliminary. We'd have to come back for a budget adjustment upward to do a new well.
Okay, and my next question for you is this. Are we saying the cost of water is going down?
The pure water, Monterey.
Pure water.
Yeah.
Now, come mid-year review, I might not be here, but I'll probably be out there sitting. I'm going to ask this question now. Are the supplies going to go up? The cost of the whatever they use out there at the plant?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there is inflation. Yeah.
So
Chemicals,
chemicals.
electricity, and labor all have inflationary pressure upward. But you're adding about $2,250 on top of 3,500, so more than 50% increase in total water produced. And so the good news there is you don't have to hire more people. You don't have to, there's more chemicals, there's more energy. The overhead allocation is a little bit different. So we're in a period of 2 years where we get a lot of economies of scale. Next year, hopefully the energy project will be online and we'll get a reduced energy cost. So this whole expansion plus looking backward at prior expenditures, what I mentioned as a true up, they're all kind of coming together in this fiscal year and then the next fiscal year. And so we should see pretty steady or even another reduction in water costs for a while before it starts going back up again.
Okay, but water rates are going to be going up.
Yeah.
General rate cases, okay.
Yeah. So the surcharge, so when you look at your bill and you see the misnamed MPWMD water purchase water surcharge.
Yes.
Because it turns out it's not just MPWMD, there's some Sand City costs in there, but that will go down proportionately but it will be expanded across a greater amount of water that they're going to purchase. So relative to all the other things that CalAm has in its revenue requirement, the other things will drive the individual customers' water rates. And so the CalAm rate case, the general rate case, has significant increases, on the order of 18% for what's called the test year, the first year. It's a big catch-up year. So the first year, which would be next calendar year, you'll see a significant jump in the rates, and that's due to all the other CalAm expenditures. But the purchase water cost is not going to be a driver of that.
All right, thank you.
So I mean, the energy project you mentioned is the one jointly with the waste management?
Correct.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that will lower the energy costs.
It's supposed to. I mean, it's supposed to. The original agreement in terms was a specific discount to the PG&E U20 rate or whatever the large customer rate is.
Well, that's really good because electricity rates go up, keep going up so much, yeah.
Sorry, Nichelle.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate the discussion. It looks like a part of the bill is going to go up and the part that's attributed to us is going to go down, but that's not a big driver. Okay. So we were looking at project expenditures. Now we're going to switch gears and look at services and supplies, which is part of operations budget. We have a total budget of 2.3 million for services and supplies, which is 9% higher than what we had this year. And the big driver, like I mentioned before, is public outreach, which has been moved from project expenditures to services and supplies. It's just a reassignment. Our IT services budget is also going up by about 25,000 or 10%. That's because we have an Acela maintenance project. We use Acela for our permitting needs. And so we needed to kind of reconfigure that the Acela system a little bit for some of our reporting needs. So that's the increase there. And then bank charges and office supplies, they're both going down. And that's because this year we had put in extra funds for the administration of the water supply charge. And so that's going away. And both these bank charges and office supplies are going back to as they were before. Professional services going down by 12%. And that's because of two reasons. One, the public outreach budget for Wellman used to be in professional services. Now it's moved to public outreach. And then second, we have a new financial auditor. We went through a competitive solicitation process this fiscal year, got a new auditor, and their price is less than the one that we had before. So those two things are kind of contributing to a lower professional services expense. And then legal services, we are adding 20,000 there, which is 5%. And this is for Delray, Laredo, and maybe Chute Mohali. So overall, the services that are contracted out, we are a small district, so we do contract out quite a few of our services. And so the big ones are legislative services through TGF and the Ferguson Group, public outreach through Wellman, legal services through Laredo, information technology through Devera, GIS systems through Links Technologies, and then audit services through the Poon Group.
And let's pause one more time because Director Edwards asked me about legal services. So the acquisition of the water system includes almost all of our outside counsel work. The 420,000 that you see here includes DeLay and Laredo. There's a little bit of Polentano, Highsmith, and Watley, which is our kind of outside counsel for Measure J issues, in this case, the MPTA taxpayer lawsuit. And there's just some follow-up hours to close out that refund to the ratepayers. that are included in there. Shoot Mahali only has work related to Measure J, so it's in the other side. So we don't anticipate a lot of outside legal service. We've been carrying 400,000 in the budget for, I don't know, 7 years running, 8 years, 10 years. And it's been pretty close to the right number. So,
Yeah, our legal services budget has stayed the same for several years.
But,
And
excuse me. When is Mr. Laredo and them contract up for rewriting or whatever?
2 more years?
I believe we have one more year.
Okay, so that's why you didn't add in there. Okay, good. All right, go ahead. Thank you.
And I meant Colintala, not Shoot Mahali. So
Yeah,
thanks for the
exactly.
correction. All right, fixed assets. This isn't a big chunk of our budget, but like I mentioned before, we plan to upgrade this conference room. We haven't received our 2 SUVs yet. We hope to get them in September. So that's the vehicle replacement budget. Building and equipment, we plan to replace an air handler unit that is reaching its end of life. And then under operating equipment, I think that's just an electrofisher for the environmental group. And then office equipment, that's just a printer. So together, that's 274 for fixed assets. Now, yes.
Just a quick question on the conference upgrade. Will we still need a body in the other room to kind of play nursemaid to the system?
Well, yeah, and that's also to serve as AMP. That's our,
Oh, that's right. Okay.
yeah. So highly likely. Carmel redid their conference room, full new electronics, no wires like you see here for 70,000 2 years ago. We're looking into whether to create a permanent dais similar to what Monterey One Water has. They're redoing theirs, I think, or at least they're budgeting to redesign it. So the goal would be to contact some design firms to see what could be done, because we don't want to lose the multi-purpose nature of this room.
Right.
But on the one hand, on the other hand, if we get a dais that wouldn't squeeze you in super tight, that would have screens so you can follow along with these presentations right at your desk, the way Monterey does and some of the others do. I think Carmel now has that. So anyway, we're looking into it. We may not, maybe we get as far as just design and then we put it off for a year. Don't know.
Well, the multi-purpose use seems like I mean, do you use it for staff meetings and?
We do.
Yeah.
And
VR.
we want a big square, all these kind of tables, and it really goes from about where Sandra is to this corner back to where you are. So we would lose some of that. We have like Carmel River task force meets here, same setup. Back before COVID, we used to have large consultant groups come in and we'd have 20 people. We've had meetings with, when we in 2015 and 16, when we put together the Pure Water Project, we would have probably 22 attendees of electeds and staffers and so forth. So we want to be able to continue to do that, but it might be nice to get better technology and make it a little nicer.
Yeah, you'd have integrated, what do they call it, integrated water management planning sessions here. You need 40 people in this room. I
Yeah.
mean, it was really packed. Yeah, okay.
Right, back to the presentation. So this slide is trying to link our strategic goals to the budget. And there are some areas where we can quantify the goal, and in other areas, the goal is going to be done as part of the operating budget. So what's quantifiable is just 3 areas. Measure J related expense, like we discussed, 1.8 million. Protection of assets at the seaside groundwater basin. We have around 800,000 there. And then the aquifer storage and recovery, optimizing that piece, that's another $500,000. The rest of the goals, now we had divided the goals into three broad categories, the highest priority, the middle level, and ongoing goals. They are all going to be part of the operating budgets within the different divisions. And so I won't go into that here, but it's all covered. So switching gears to the revenue side of the budget, and this is the breakdown. Again, more than half of our revenues coming from water sales. About 1/5 of our revenues is user fees, another 8% for property taxes, and 9% from reimbursements. And then permits and capacity fees are a much smaller percentage of our overall revenues budget. This is a breakdown between operating revenues and reimbursement revenues. So our operating revenues, and I'll go into the details here, but they're going up by 4%. And that's mostly because of two reasons. Our user fees is going up by about 7%. And then the revenue from the sale of water is also going up because we're buying more water, even if it's at a lower cost. And then reimbursement and grants, that revenue is going down by 55%. And again, that's mostly because two of our big grants are coming to a close. The Pure Water Monitor Expansion Project, the first grant was from Urban Community Drought, and the other one was from the State Water Resources Control Board. So those we hope will be complete this fiscal year. And then we plan to use about 2.7 million of our general reserve to balance the budget, along with about 82,000 from our asset replacement reserve, which will go towards the 2 SUVs that we plan to buy. So this is a breakdown of our operating revenues, and we're comparing this to the current fiscal year revised budget. User fee, our estimated forecast is 8.4 million. That's a 7.5% increase. And what we do is we look at CalAM's revenue projections, and then we multiply our user fee percentage, the 8.3%, to their revenues, and then we conservatively take 95% of that and come up with a number. And so that's 8.4. Property tax revenues, a small, modest increase of about 2.7%. Water sales going up by 4%. So in the budget, we plan to buy, I think, 7% more water, but at 12% lower cost. And the combined effect is it's a 4% increase. Capacity fees and permit fees, the same that we had this year. These numbers are slightly higher than what we have used in prior years. But we have a few large projects in the pipeline, and so this reflects that. Interest revenue is slightly down. This one's hard to predict because if inflation stays high, then maybe the interest revenue is going to stay high. And this is all driven by the Fed interest rates and interest income from Treasury and bank CDs and government agencies. But it's still pretty elevated. So our total operating revenue is at around 33 million. And switching gears to reimbursements, we plan to get around 800,000 from CalAM. This is for the ASR facility and the rebates combined. So that's the 799 that you see. The 2.4 million in grants is revenue from the state for the IRWM grants. Deed restrictions, these are funds that we get from the applicants. And then we'll get smaller pieces of revenue from the water master and the reclamation project and legal fees and water permits. So our total reimbursement revenue stands at 3.5 million.
So,
Yes.
so to the chair, we have no more FEMA grants out there that we have to collect from.
Right.
All that been took, okay.
And we did have a little spare FEMA grant and they said, don't give it back.
It was chump change for them.
Yeah.
That's too small.
Well, it was jump change, how much was it?
Sorry.
How much was it?
I think it was around 60,000. I can look it up.
Okay, no, you-
50 to 60.
Yeah, it's about right.
that's good, just,
Yeah.
And we use most of that funding for the Sleepy Hollow facility. And
okay.
we plan to do some waterproofing there and those funds could be used. But now those funds are part of our fund balance, so.
All
we
right,
can use it.
I just wanted to know. Thank you.
This slide looks at both sources and uses. So money coming in and money leaving. So it's looking at expenses and revenues together. And it's showing that our budget is balanced. So the first table is the expenses, about 8.8 million in personnel, services, and supplies. That's around 22% of our total budget. Project expenditures, including water sales, that's less than 30 million, but 75% of our budget. And then we plan to contribute to our reserves, pension, OPEB, and asset replacement. That's 607, and I'm going to go into this in a little detail. District revenues, like we just reviewed, 33 million in operating revenues, 3.5 million in reimbursements, and then 2.8 million in user reserves from the general reserve and the asset replacement reserve. So that brings us to 39.4 for users and sources. All right, this is now, so we're going to switch gears. The budget looks at expenses and revenues in 1 year. And here we are looking at the expenditures across the last 10 years, projecting them out till 2028. And the reason we have this slide is because I think there was some interest within the FSC committee members or maybe the board members to know the impact of the reduction in water supply charge and what's going to happen to our revenues going forward. And what you see here is revenues going back to 2016, going back to 10 years, and then a projection till 2028. So if you look at 2024, by the way, the red is the user fees and the green is the water supply revenue. So all the revenues are shown within one bar for each fiscal year. And going back to 2016, you can see that the water supply charge was a big chunk of our revenues, this green right here. But then as we come to 2023, that percentage has shrunk. And the rate of increase of user fees should compensate for the loss in the water supply charge by 2028. And another way to look at it is, I was thinking about this, like how to best present this. Let's look at, if you look at our revenue streams at 3 different points in time. 2016, 10 years back, 2023, which is 1 year before the water supply charge went away, and then 2028. And then just look at the composition of revenues in these different years. I think it will give us a better picture. So our revenues in 2016 were less than 6 million. And you can see the green, which is the water supply charge, was about 57% of our total revenues. In 2023, our revenues are at 13 million, and that water supply charge is about a quarter of our revenues. And by 2028, this is projecting how the user fees are increasing. The green goes away, the water supply charge goes away, and it's, the user fee has basically compensated for that loss. And revenues are back to almost where they were in 2023. So I hope that gives a good idea. And our user fees have been increasing at the rate of 9 to 10% in the last 2 years. Moving forward, this scenario is just projecting growth at the rate of 4 to 6%. So a muted increase. But even with that, we are in a financially sustainable position. So I thought it would be a good piece of information to show as part of this presentation.
Yeah, go back to your bar chart just to give you some historical information. So in 2011 was when the Public Utilities Commission terminated the collection of the user fee. And so in 2012 was the implementation of the water supply charge. So that's why the green came into existence. We sued the Public Utilities Commission at the Supreme Court. We won, and they were instructed to reinstate the user fee. I think it was 2015, but it took us 2 years to actually have it reinstated. And that's why it shows up again in 2017. And then we lost the lawsuit, as you're well aware, on the water supply charge. We would have collected both for a period of time going forward until we had absorbed all of these water supply project costs, ASR, the treatment facility, Pure Water Monterey. And our intent was to repay the funds that we borrowed from ourselves for those projects. We still have not repaid ourselves, but we've kind of said, see you later to those repayments. So chances are this will bear true or even quicker because we've been, our user fee follows the CalAM rate increases, and we've been seeing some pretty significant rate increases. And if in fact a desalination plant comes online at some point in 2029 or 2030, then our user fee would shoot through the roof because the revenue requirement for CalAM would also go up about 40 to 60%.
So the property tax revenue is not going up all that much. Huh?
Surprisingly, due to home sales and revaluations there, and it's growing faster than the 2% cap. So we do see pretty significant increases. This will be the first year that we're over 3 million in receipts. And I think when I got here, it was around 2 million. So
Homes are selling,
yeah.
and they're getting reevaluated.
Yeah, that's through the chair. I'm glad to see a long-range picture of where we've been, the road to current and what you're projecting for the next couple of years. I'm just glad to see this. It just helps clarify. Otherwise, you gotta remember some of this stuff. And it's nice to see it.
I agree. It's good to have that background and presented visually. There was also the loan, right, that the district took out. Wasn't that the impetus for that, the loss of the water supply charge, or was that?
No, well, yes, we did take, it was originally the Rabobank loan.
Okay.
Yeah, so part of that was we had borrowed from our reserves to pay for the ASR project. And then we did actually pass, using Prop 218, a little portion of our 8.32% to repay ASR. That was 1.2% of the 8.325. That wasn't enough to actually do the projects. We had the very expensive treatment building, the expansion of the wash basin and so forth. So we took that original part of the 4 million and we replenished what we had spent on ASR to date. So we did repay ourselves. Then of course we use that repayment in our general reserves to pay for more water supply projects. But yeah, that was the impetus for taking that Rabobank loan, which is, I don't know where we stand on that. Is it, we
It's
paid it
paid
off?
off.
Yeah, we paid it off.
2023.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the last payment was 2.8 million. Yeah, that would show up as debt expense on the expenditure side. And we are in a good position to actually have zero debt at this point. Which is actually a good segue for the next slide. Future obligations and commitments. So even though we don't have debt, we have some outstanding obligations. The two big ones are the CalPERS pension unfunded accrued liability, as it's called, or the pension obligation that stands at about 7.5 million. The retiree medical obligation is less than 5 million. And we also plan to buy 1,000 acre feet for the drought reserve. And that's a placeholder number for 3.8 million. And I think what's not here is replacement of our capital and facilities, because we do set aside funding through the asset replacement reserve. But so there's a number there, but that obligation isn't defined. I think what we do is we just look at the total amount of depreciation per year and set aside that as a reserve to replace for those assets. Also, what's not here is any legal or litigation related expenses, because that's unknown and it's hard to quantify. But what's known here is around 16 million in outstanding obligations outside of the capital or the asset replacement piece. And so what are we doing for these outstanding obligations? We are still planning to set aside some amount for the pension reserve and the OPEB reserve. And then the asset replacement reserve, this just comes from the depreciation schedule. That's another 400,000. Together, we're planning to set aside 607,000 in reserves. In prior years, if we had a surplus, that surplus would go towards the general reserve. But this time around, we are actually using the general reserve. So there's nothing to set aside here.
And pause on this one as well. Earlier, he showed you the slide of 2.7 million being taken from general reserves. Part of it is just reallocating it back to the pension reserve, the OPEB reserve, and the asset replacement reserve. So there's, call it 600,000. That gets you down to about 2.1 million. And remember, the Measure J costs are about 1.8 million. So those two say that there's really just $300,000 or $400,000 of use of reserves on the other operations of the district.
Yeah, so how are we using the reserves? So there are three broad categories where the reserve is being used. One is Measure J, 1.8 million. There is a re-drilling of 3 seaside wells, that's another 800,000. And then 300 acre feet of drought reserve, that's another 1.1 million. So that's approximately the 2 million that we are saying that we plan to draw. So that's all going towards our capital projects or strategic goals. So we are.
No, finish your thought. Unless you're.
No, I was just saying we aren't using reserves for our operations. We are using it for one-time capital expenses. So in that way, we are still being good stewards of our financial resources.
I just don't want to lose track also of the history of the reserves. I think right before you came on, we had reserves of like $1 million or something. I don't know what it was. It wasn't a minus number, but it wasn't much.
So Suresh came on in July of 2011, and I came on in September of 2011. And in September of 2011, I said, do a projection of where we expect to end up at June 30th of 2012. And it was about 300,000 total reserves.
Bad position
Yeah.
to be in.
Which is why we implemented the water supply charge and sued the PUC over the user fee.
No, I mean, I don't want to forget that history either. I mean, I like the track record, and you went back to when the PUC eliminated the user charge. But I want to go back even further and just.
It was bleak, and the reason it was bleak was, I'll just lay it out there. We did not pay attention financially. And so we had budgeted the user fee income at about 3.7 million a year. It kept coming in at about 2.8 million a year. And we didn't learn from that for 3 or 4 years.
Wow.
And so you're, basically starting to pull reserves to cover it. And that was an example of when reserves were being used to pay operating costs.
Hmm. So the 2.7 million that we're drawing from reserves for this budget. We think it likely that that'll be like a one-time thing. I mean, that going forward, we will not need to. I realize there's a lot of unknowns, but
Yeah. So you remember the bar chart, and he's suggesting that by 2028, we're indifferent to where we are last year. It could mean that we still have to take a little bit from reserves next fiscal year.
Mhm.
Depends on whether we want to increase the drought reserve or just stop paying for that. You know, there's things that we can do, but yeah.
But overall, much improved, especially considering we had the loss of the water supply charge.
Oh, absolutely. And I think our goal is to really, I'd like to see us stay at 15 million or higher until we resolve all the bench trial, right to take trial, all that stuff.
It's important. It's important to have a policy that we strive for and to reach it, and also to expect that we have flexibility because we have a pretty strong reserve
Yes,
fund.
yes, very important. I want to say I appreciate the slide that links the expenditures to the priorities, the strategic priorities. Good to include that.
Okay, so we are coming to a close. Actually, this might have been the very last slide. So this provides a picture of our reserves. Our estimated projection for the end of the current fiscal year and then the end of next fiscal year. And as you can see here, at the end of next fiscal year, our reserves are going down by 2.5 million or so. So they will be at around 21.4 million. Of course, this is a projection. You know, revenues could come in higher, expenditures could come in lower, in which case our ending position could be much better. But there are three different kinds of reserves. One is in the bank, and that's like the first table. And then there are some reserves that are in the ground, which is the second table. And there we have the Pure Water Monterey Reserve, which is also on our books. So we have 7.9 million or almost 8 million on our books. This is water that has been injected into the ground. And then we have ESR storage, which is not on our books, but it's still water in the ground. It's a reserve that can be used. We don't own it because it's jointly owned by with CalAm, and so but that water reserve is available. And
Yeah, and
I'll probably
actually,
speak to this.
yeah, the acre feet amount is in the 2027 column. So likely ASR storage will go up because we'll have another winter under our belts by then. You know, we did 916 acre feet this year, 716 last year. And that's with the restrictions on the amount of injection capacity. The 5308 actually rounds up to 5309. And, you know, let's assume we get another 1,000 or somewhere between 500 and 1,000 next year. So all of that is looking good. The Pure Water Monterey Reserve, the operating reserve requirement is going to be, well, it's 2,875 acre feet, and we're going to hit that at the end of this month, so in 3 days. And then we hope to take about another 122 acre feet into the drought reserve, possibly this month. And if not, a full 200 before the end of the fiscal year. And then next year, another 200. So 2,875 plus 200 plus 200 is 3,275. And then we'll make a decision whether we want a third 200, a fourth 200, and a fifth 200 in the drought reserve, if we can afford it.
I just want to say that I'm glad to see the water reserves presented in the format that it is. the admin and finance committee was recommending that we show water reserves in some fashion, and you've done a nice job.
Well, assuming we take over CalAm's system, first thing we're going to do is renegotiate the water purchase agreement to reduce the operating reserve requirement, and then we can monetize some of that water sitting in the ground and use it for operations. Because it's a full 6 months of reserve. And for the plant to get interrupted for 6 months would be force majeure, an act of God type of thing. So we don't need an operating reserve for that. So it's a lot of money stored in the ground. Something to think about.
Question about the ASR water, which doesn't have a price tag attached to it. If and when it is produced to meet demand, there's not a pass-through charge to the ratepayer the way there is for pure water money. Is that right?
There will be some operating expense because CalAm has to lift it, so there's electricity, and treat it, so there's some chemicals.
So is it a timetable? I know we're dealing with CalAm. Is it a timetable on ASR 4 to convert it back? Do we have we need to come up with a table that telling us that, okay, we want to get here because now is the time to do it. So it can be ready for next season.
Yeah, there's been staff level discussion, kind of feet on the ground, but we don't have a plan yet.
Okay, we need to come up with a plan with that one. So that's a big one.
But optimization, it would, if you come up with something that seems feasible and reasonable cost, could be done within what, a couple of years?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so this slide was a result of Director Riley's request, and we try to present that information in one slide. And overall, our reserve situation looks very robust, and we, that like it was said, gives us the flexibility, the operating flexibility at this point to take on the projects that we have lined up. I think that brings us to a close. So there's no formal action at this meeting. Other than discussion and any comments that we might receive. We'll get ready to finalize it in the next board meeting.
Okay, we're gonna get a little bit more formal as we close down here, right? You guys had a lot of discussion, a lot of talking. So do you have any questions, any corrections, any changes? Comfortable with the way it was laid out? No problems, no issues.
I have a few just minor questions that I'd just like to pursue just to get some answers, if I could. On the document that was distributed earlier, which is the narrative form, not the PowerPoint. I'm looking at page 13, and it shows the potential reserve categories that have nothing in them. No money's been allocated. I understand the policy is that's what policy, but under what circumstances would we be thinking about putting money into these other reserve categories?
Again, the policy stipulates how reserves will be assigned, and each reserve has a certain criteria. I think for the compensated absences reserve, this is for all the vacation and sick leave that gets accrued, but that's a liability in our books. And I think we project who's going to retire in the next 2 or 3 years and then put that funding. And the funding is going to come from any surplus that we get in the fiscal year. So when we close the books at the end of the year, if revenues exceed expenditures, that surplus will get assigned to these reserves in the way the policy states it would be. So that's compensated absences. Capital projects is different. Any revenues that we receive for capacity fees, excess revenues that were budgeted or over budget would get assigned to the capital projects reserve. So every reserve is different.
And you wouldn't have a debt service reserve or a debt reserve until you go out and bond for
Yeah, you should have bonds.
capital.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be dictated by the debt covenants and debt agreement that we might have.
Can I jump to page 39? This is just a comment, nothing to it. On page 39, you talk about two grants that were from the drought relief, water resource control board grant. These are sizable grants, 12 million and almost 5 million. I just wanted to at least in my opinion, it seems like when we are able to qualify and receive grants of this size from the state or from other agencies, public agencies, which are federal, usually these are state grants, I think.
Those two were.
Yeah.
It kind of confirms to me that this is a public service that should not be subject to commodity pricing or corporate ownership, really is another thing I'm saying. And I just say that this kind of confirms to me that we're all in the same picture here about what water is. And it shouldn't be treated like a commodity. That's all I'm trying to say. That was just 30 minutes of promo. 30 seconds, excuse me.
Director Paul.
No further questions.
Okay, thank you, Director Edwards.
No first question.
Thank you so much. We'll open up public comment. Public comment is open.
We have 3 staff members in attendance, but however, no one raised hand.
One, and Lucy.
Hi, it's Mary Ann. I just wanted you to know that I had a late change of plans and so I was not able to become a panelist, but I have enjoyed this riveting presentation from the standpoint of a member of the public, and it's been very clear. And thank you very much.
Did you have any questions?
I don't think there's any, well, I mean, I had a very a small question about a very small expenditure, but more because I was interested in the significance of it as an activity. There was a very small allocation to advancing Los Padres Dam alternatives, and I was just curious about what was entailed with that.
Is that a John question?
That'd be a Thomas question, but I think I put it in there as a placeholder. Because we don't want to. One of the worst things you can do is spend a ton of money on a report and then just put it on a shelf. And there have been 4 ongoing studies related to Los Padres Dam. 2 of them I think are now complete. And there's no actual work required that we budgeted this small sum for. But in case something bubbles up to continue the progress, we're kind of stuck with 2 alternatives at this point, which is either dam removal or leave the dam in place and then do fish passage. Because there's no sediment management program, eventually the second scenario would result in a dam that's sedimented in. But it would defer the 100 million or 200 million to 20, 25, 30 years from now. So there's reasons to beat up it. But anyway, it was just simply a placeholder to say if there's additional studies or additional work that has to be done, let's not forget about it. Let's budget for it.
Marion, did you have anything else? You had any comments?
No
No.
further comments. Thank you.
You comfortable with the budget?
Yes, I am. Looks great.
Okay. And we'll all have another opportunity to have concerns. This is not the last opportunity.
Right,
Mr.
right.
Chairman,
So hold on a second. Okay, if that's done, then I'll close public comment. Bring it back to the board, Mr. General Manager.
I just want to encourage you to, if you spend your weekend going back over any of this material, feel free to email us any questions or suggestions, because we've got some time to incorporate it for the 15th.
Thank you very much for all the work that went into it and for presenting it very clearly.
Yeah, if I can just add a comment too. The package that came to us, to me, was a fresh look at a lot of information. There's an informative narrative, it was presented a little different way, I thought. And I just thought it was very, very well done. I mean, I don't normally say I enjoy reading a budget, but but I found some good reasons why I was kind of sticking with it, which were good reasons.
Well,
Pictures.
Anyone else before we close?
Michelle did a very nice job.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. And right, anybody else want to say anything before we close? You want to say anything? You want to say anything? You want to say?
I'm done, thanks.
Okay, I thought it was very refreshing. I like the way it looked. You know, I can see a little difference between the other ones, but I like the package that you guys put together, and then I like the PowerPoint too, the presentation, and not truncating the full package, but just getting to the highlighted details. So I thought that was well done. Anybody else? If there's nothing else, I mean, if you guys can say something, you want to say something, but if there's nothing else, we'll move to our regular meeting is what, June 15th? 6 p.m. here. There'll be nothing further on this agenda. This meeting is adjourned.